Today we're going to explore one big question. Will the DNA result finally make James's father accept Deep and little Nye? Will James protect the child they've chosen as family, or will bloodline and power tear them apart? If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next episodes. Morning mist clung to the trees when James crouched in the tiny dirt yard in front of the shack. All right, he held out his hand. One more round today, okay? I'm right here. Deep pushed herself up from the wobbly wooden chair, fingers gripping his arm. Her injured leg trembled as she set her foot on the uneven ground. Every time she swayed, James steadied her, patient as ever. Slowly, he murmured. Step, then shift your weight. Good. Again. Sweat beaded on Deep's forehead, soaking into the collar of her faded shirt, but her eyes were brighter than they'd been in weeks. At least she was standing. At least she was moving. On the doorstep, little Nye swung her legs, hugging a ragged cloth doll. Go, Mommy Deep, you can do it. Daddy James is super strong, you won't fall. James glanced back, pretending to be offended. Hey, when did I become Daddy James? I thought I was Uncle James. Nye scrunched her nose, answering as if it was obvious. I changed it. I like it better. I have a dad and a mum now. I don't want to go anywhere else. The childish words hit harder than any grown-up speech. Deep steps faltered for half a second. She looked at James. Their eyes met, soft, startled. Then both quickly looked away, hiding the emotion under small smiles. The wind slid through gaps in the rusty roof. Chickens clucked beyond the bamboo fence, poor, cramped, half-broken. But laughter slowly stitched itself into the place. Down in town, the atmosphere was completely different. A black metal gate guarded a neat tiled yard. Inside the cool living room, James's father sat on a leather sofa, back straight, fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. On the low table, a teapot steamed beside a plate of untouched fruit. The doorbell rang. The maid hurried out, then returned with a man in a white shirt and neat trousers. He carried a brown envelope and a cautious, respectful expression. Good morning, sir, the doctor bowed slightly. I've brought the DNA results, just as you requested. James's father didn't stand. He gestured to the chair opposite. Sit. The doctor sat, placing the envelope on the table with both hands. We followed the correct procedure, sir. The team collected blood samples at your home last time, labelled them on the spot. The test was run twice to avoid any error. And? James's father asked, eyes fixed on the envelope. In short, the doctor said carefully, the woman named Dieppe and the little girl, Nye, are not biologically related. There is no mother-daughter blood tie. Silence dropped over the room. James's father leaned forward, picked up the envelope and tore it open. The report inside was thin and crisp. Conclusion. Individual 1, Deep, and Individual 2, N High, share no direct blood relation. He read the line again and again. For days, rumours had buzzed around him. Look at that girl, she has the same eyes as Deep. She probably dragged her own child up the mountain to trap James. Who adopts a kid when she can't even feed herself? He had believed them. Or at least he had wanted to. Anger was easier than worry. Suspicion felt safer than trust. Now the paper in his hand said one thing. He'd been wrong. The doctor cleared his throat. We're confident in the results, sir. There's no mistake. James's father folded the report, slid it back into the envelope and set it down. His face stayed calm. So she really adopted the girl, he said slowly. As far as the test shows, yes, the doctor replied. For a brief moment, something like shame flickered in his eyes. Shame for sending a team all the way up the mountain just to prove a woman's supposed lie. But another thought rose faster. If the girl wasn't her blood, then she certainly wasn't his family's blood either. He straightened his shoulders. You've done well, he said. Thank you. The doctor understood the dismissal and left, relieved to be outside the heavy house again. When the door closed, the silence seemed heavier. James's father stared at the envelope. Not her child, he muttered. She's poor, she can barely walk, and she still drags a child up a mountain. The word love hovered at the edge of his thoughts, but he refused to let it land. In his mind, old beliefs lined up neatly. Bloodline, family name, incense on the altar. Everything else was temporary. Finally, he reached for his phone and dialed his wife. She picked up quickly. "You got the results?" she asked, nervous. "Yes," he said flatly. "They're not related. No blood ties. The girl is adopted." On the other end, there was a small, surprised breath. "So Dieppe didn't lie. Maybe we misjudged her." "Our judgment isn't the problem," he cut in. "The problem is this. They're poor. They live in a half-broken shack. James is carrying a woman who can barely stand and a child that has nothing to do with our bloodline." He walked to the window, looking out at his tidy courtyard. "You saw that house," he continued, quieter but no softer. "Can they really raise a child there? Pay for school? Medicine? Think 10, 20 years from now?" His wife hesitated. "All I know is, the girl looked happy with them," she whispered. "She called us Grandma and Grandpa. My heart. Happiness doesn't pay for her future," he said, jaw tightening. "If we leave things like this, James will bury his whole life on that mountain, and our real grandchildren. What then?" He let the words sink in. "We're going up there," he said. "We'll talk, make James think clearly. And if there's a better place for that girl, a place with money, stability, real chances, we'll move her." "You mean, take Nye away?" his wife asked, voice shaking. "I mean," he replied, "I'll do what's best for my son, and for our family." He ended the call. The camera moves back to the coffee table. His hand rests on the envelope, thumb rubbing over the words, "No direct blood relation." Back on the mountain, the light turned soft and gold. Deep finished another slow circle around the yard and dropped into the chair, laughing breathlessly. "That's it," she panted. "Any more and you'll have to carry me." "Gladly," James grinned, handing her water. "You're ahead of schedule. The doctor said months. Look at you." Nye rushed over with a chipped plastic cup. "Mommy Deep, drink. Later we go see the stream, okay? I'll hold your hand." Deep smiled, ruffling her hair. "Okay, little guide, but we go slowly." For one quiet moment, they looked exactly like any small family at the end of a long day. Tired, messy, content. Far below, an engine started. James didn't hear it yet. Deep didn't sense it. Nee kept chattering about fish and wildflowers. But somewhere on the winding dirt road, a motorbike was already climbing toward them, carrying a man with a folded envelope in his pocket, and a plan he believed was for the family's own good. Late afternoon light was fading when the sound of an engine climbed toward the little house on the slope. James paused with a bucket of water in his hands. The motorbike coughed over rocks until a familiar black helmet appeared at the bend. "But James!" Nye squealed. "Someone's coming!" James stepped out to the crooked bamboo gate. His father killed the engine and swung his leg off the bike. James's mother climbed down behind him. "Dad? Mum?" James frowned. "You didn't call?" "Do I need an appointment to see my own son?" his father replied. "You live so far now, if I don't come, I might as well forget I have children." Nye ran up. "Grandpa, you came. I swept the yard. No chicken poop today." He pulled a plastic bag from the bike basket. "Here, cakes," he muttered. "For you." "Thank you." Nie hugged the bag, then tugged his sleeve. "Come in, Grandpa, Grandma. Mommy Deep is inside." The word mommy made James's mother blink. She glanced at her husband. His jaw tightened, but he walked into the house. Inside, the living room was just a bed, a wobbly table and a plank shelf. Dieppe tried to stand when she saw them. "Uncle, Auntie, you're here," she said softly. "Please sit. The house is small." James rushed to support her. "Don't. You'll fall," he whispered. She still straightened her back, bowing before sitting again. James's mother's eyes reddened as she took in the thin blanket, the patched mosquito net, Nie's tiny clothes drying in a plastic basin. "It's all right," she murmured. "We're the ones who should apologise for not visiting earlier." James's father sat back straight, gaze sweeping the room. His eyes paused on a school notebook with crooked letters on the cover. "Nye," he called. "Come here." She ran over. "Yes, Grandpa." "How's school?" he asked. "I don't go yet," she answered. Mummy says when she can walk better and Daddy James has more money, they'll send me. But I know letters already. Want to see?" She rushed to grab her notebook. James's father didn't respond. His fingers tapped on his knee. James tried to smile. "We're working on it, Dad. After the harvest, I'll have more to invest. Then we'll register everything properly." His father turned to him. "When you decided to keep this child," he asked, "did you think about 10 years from now? 20? Who she'll be?" James opened his mouth, but Deep spoke first. "She'll be safe," she said quietly. "She won't be left alone again. We'll send her to school. Even if I have to crawl to work, I'll do it." The wind picked up, making the roof rattle. James's father reached into his jacket. "Since you're being honest," he said, "I should be honest too." He placed a brown envelope on the table. James stared. "What is that?" he asked. "I asked the hospital to test you two," his father said, eyes on Deep. "You and the girl." The room went still. "At the last checkup," he continued, "they took blood from both of you. I told them to compare it, to see if you were lying." Diep's fingers tightened on the edge of the bed. "You thought I lied?" she whispered. "That knee is my own child?" Nye clutched her sleeve. James's chair scraped as he stood. "Dad," he burst out, "how could you do that without telling us? She trusted you. We let your people into our house." His father opened the envelope and slid the report across. "Read," he said. James's hand shook as he picked it up. "No blood relation," he read. Deep shut her eyes. Knee pressed closer. "You see?" James looked up. "She told the truth. She adopted Nias. She never lied to you." James's father's face stayed unmoved. "That's exactly my point," he said. "The girl is not your child. Not by blood. Not by law. Right now she's just someone you decided to keep." "Family isn't only blood," James shot back. "Easy to say now," his father replied. "You broke your back to build a company. Now you risk everything for a woman who might never walk properly, and a child with no link to our name." James's mother spoke, voice small. "She may not be our blood," she said. "She calls us Grandma and Grandpa. Isn't that something?" "That won't pay for her school," he answered. "When she needs money for life, will those words be enough? Or will she pull all of you down?" "I don't want to pull anyone down," Neve whispered. Deep's eyes shone, but her voice stayed steady. "If you want to blame someone, blame me," she said. "I begged James to keep her. Nye never asked to be here. If you need to throw someone away, throw me. Don't touch her." James's father watched her. "I don't want to throw anyone away," he said. "I want the child to have a future, something you can't give her here." He stood. "Come eat," James's mother cut in. "The food will get cold." They gathered around the low table. Rice, vegetables, a small plate of fish. No one ate much. Halfway through the meal, James's father put his chopsticks down. "One question," he said. "Answer honestly." He looked at James, then Deep, then Nye. "If one day her real parents show up at this door, with money, with a proper home, with everything she needs, will you let her go?" The wind pushed against the thin walls. Nee's voice was barely a breath. "I don't want to go with strangers," she said. "I want to stay with Mommy and Daddy." James closed his eyes, then met his father's gaze. "Even if her real parents come," he said slowly, "this is her home now. We'll fight to keep her." Deep nodded. "I won't abandon her again," she added. James's father exhaled. "That's what I was afraid of," he said. He walked to the door. His silhouette was dark against the pale sky. "Thank you for the meal," he said. "Rest. I'll think about everything." He stepped into the cold evening. His wife followed. Night swallowed the mountain. Inside the shack, Nee slept curled between James and Diep, fingers hooked around Diep's sleeve. Down in town, James's father sat alone in his living room. The brown envelope lay on the table next to his phone. After a long time, he picked up the phone and dialed a number saved as contact. A man answered. "Hello?" "It's me," James's father said. "Your centre still takes children, right? Those without clear papers?" "Yes, sir. Is there a case you're worried about?" "There's a girl on the mountain," he replied. She isn't related to us by blood. I don't want her future wasted up there. I want to talk about options. Cut to a shot of a motorbike starting in the dark, headlights turning toward the mountain road. Back in the shack, the thin curtain trembled in the wind around the sleeping child. Nee's face was peaceful, unaware that far below adults were already deciding where she should belong.
Nhớ con gái Nhi ra giết nhưng vẫn chấp nhận để cô Huyên nuôi thêm vài ngày vì ở chỗ con bừa bộn và Dềm vừa mất việc. Sau khi khép lại, Diệp mời Dềm về ăn cơm tối giản dị cùng nồi cơm thề nhưng đây trần tinh ở một thế giới hoàn toàn khác. Dềm đối với người cha chuyên quyền lực trong tập đoàn gia đình. Ông nghi ngờ Diệp lợi dụng tiền bạc bắt Dềm chứng minh tình cảm bằng cách tự lập, không dùng một đồng cắt nào của gia đình. Nếu thất bại phải chia tay, Dềm chấp nhận thử thách, tự đi đăng ký công ty DG. Cuối ngày anh trở lại căn tròi nhỏ, thông báo tin vui cùng Diệp ăn bữa cơm nghe mà ấm áp, mở ra hành trình trùng đây trùng gai.